Hello, everyone. I enjoy talking about theories or doing theory crafts for games. Unfortunately, there isn't very many games for me to do that with. Fire Emblem Three Houses is the latest. I have good reason for wanting to do a recording about that. This is one of the few articles that goes over the different waves, at least in a way that's easy to look at. Eventually, they're going to add the Lunatic difficulty. After Lunatic difficulty comes new store content, characters, and whatnot. There is a very good reason for me to do this. In order for me to talk about my theories as to why I think certain classes are good, we need to look at equipment, magic, abilities, and a lot of other stuff. Let's go ahead and start with weapons. We'll go and focus on axes and lances for the time being, just because it's one of the few weapons outside of bows that actually gets a ranged weapon. It's not very far, as you can see it's 1 to 2 for both, but the stats are different. We're going to look at the plus because of the fact that if I look at the base values and stuff from the non-plus, it's just going to add to the time. So anyways, Tomahawk is 13 might, 60 hit. On the lance side, it's going to be your spear, which is 9 might, 70 hit. So the spear does less damage than the tomahawk, but it has a higher hit rate. In addition, the combat art changes the values of it. You'll see why in just a second. So sword, lance, and axe all get a magic damage combat art. For sword, it's Hexblade, which is a flat might and hit chance. For lance, that's Frozen Lance, which is might and hit chance, but then it's furthered by dexterity. For axes, it's just a flat damage, no bonus to hit, and it's increased by resistance. So that's a problem. Most of the good axe classes are not going to be growing resistance. Dexterity, on the other hand, is found on some of the lance classes that are actually good. We'll go over that shortly. Let's go and talk about the next set of weapons, which is going to be bows. While lances and axes can do magic ranged attacks, they may or may not be as valuable as bows in certain circumstances. For that reason, it is going to be needed to a certain degree. With that in mind, out of the bows that you get here, longbow actually does get a ranged bonus over the other bows that are what we call vanilla, i.e. not magical or named. So for vanilla, it does get a range bonus. So longbow is actually going to be pretty important to keep in mind as we go into class discussion. But yeah, it's might 11, hit 70, and range 2 to 3. So that's pretty crazy because with sniper class, that means you get up to 4. Again, something we'll go over pretty shortly. Let's go ahead and look at magic now. Black and dark magic does have a lot of damage spells, that's true. But black and dark magic only does damage. White magic is a little bit more versatile, and for that reason I think white magic is the most valuable out of the three. You'll notice that out of the damaging spells, it gets Nosferatu, Seraphim, Aura, and Abraxas. Out of that, Seraphim gets additional damage against monsters, which is unique to white magic. That's pretty important because monsters are one of the tougher ones in the game. They just take a lot of hits. So this is pretty valuable to have. But more importantly, silence and rescue are very valuable. Rescue allows you to move an ally to a space next to the user. When we get into classes, you'll see why that's pretty important. But silence is the crazy one out of the two support spells. Look at its range, 3 to 10. It prevents a mage from using magic for 1 turn. That means you can attack a mage that's silenced and they won't be able to counter you. This means that if you have a character that's weak, you can protect them. You can't guarantee that with the other magics. So this actually helps with leveling other characters, just because you can protect them. And even if you're not trying to protect a lower level class, it still helps. If there's a mage that just does a stupid amount of damage, remove that problem right away. Let's go ahead and look at abilities now, and then actually abilities and then stats. So each of these things that we've been looking at have a skill associated with them, such as riding, flying, or the other ones. One thing you want to keep in mind is that each one of them comes with a passive ability for you to slot. Riding gets Dexterity +4 and Movement +1. Depending on how you've built the character, you may not have enough room to slot Dexterity +4, but if you can, it works great with Frozen Lance. The more important one out of the two, though, is Movement +1. From what I've been able to tell with the game and from discussions with Twitch streamers, this applies to the unit even if they aren't mounted. That's a pretty crazy thought to have as we go into class discussions. For flying, though, they get Alert Stance, which makes it so that if you do nothing other than wait, you get Avoidance +15. That's another crazy one to think about. But yeah, this is just a small example of abilities. I'll give you this list to look at so you can see other things. Finally, we need to discuss stats. So they're pretty straightforward for the most part. You can see strength affects your physical damage, magic affects magic damage, dexterity affects hit rate and critical hit chance, speed affects your avoidance rate, luck is various things, defense is only from physical attacks, resistance is reduced damage from magical attacks. Now, defense is not that valuable, speed is. Avoidance applies to not only melee weapons, bows, but also magic. You can completely avoid magic strikes. That makes this more valuable than defense. For that reason, the classes that I will be saying are good are going to be very limited. I guess we can talk about Charm real quickly, or Charisma. That increases your gambit attacks from battalions. From what I've seen, battalions can help in certain circumstances because they allow you to do damage without any really drawbacks to be seen of. But unfortunately, Charisma is not really something that's grown on certain classes. Again, we'll get into that shortly. Okay, let's go and get into the class discussions once I give the warning. From what I've seen, this remains true. The personal growths for characters have been data mined, but the class growth rates have not. So keep that in mind as we go through the growth rates for the classes. Let's go ahead and start with the high mobility classes, which are your flying and cavalry. Starting with Paladin. Paladin is the only one that I will agree with that should be S tier. The reason it's in S tier and the reason I agree with it is because of how balanced the stats growth is. Even if the numbers are off on this website, the fact of the matter is it's easy to see in game that this just grows a whole bunch of different stats. The only one that's really not growing is speed, which is fine. You can kind of compensate for the lack of speed through the fact that it's getting both defense and resistance. So yes, I'll agree Paladin is S tier for the stat growth and for the movement. Again, based on what I've seen with the game and from what I've been able to figure out from Twitch streamers, Paladin has the highest movement speed even when demounted. That's pretty crazy to think about, that you can demount a Paladin and it's still crazy fast on movement. It can move a lot of tiles in just a very short amount of time. Okay, outside of Paladin, the only other cavalry class that I would consider is Holy Knight. Holy Knight gets White Tome Fair damage as its passive ability, so that's great because it means you can do more damage with the mentioned white magic spells, but the problem is it doesn't get increased white magic use like Bishop does. So you have to really consider how to use Holy Knight and also consider like how it fits with your tactics. If you're not going to be using Rescue or Silence all that much, then Holy Knight's perfectly fine. But if you're going to be using it a lot, then Bishop is your go-to, just because of the fact that it gets white magic uses as well as plus healing on Bishop, so keep that in mind. It is true that you can use Gremory for that particular purpose, but I really don't like the idea of Gremory. I get that it's a powerful class and all, but yeah, I really don't agree with that class in the slightest. Just for the fact of that this gets heal and basically the same thing. It gets more white magic use. But yeah, moving on. Now we need to discuss flying units, as they're the other high mobility class outside of cavalry. A lot of the lists that I see and a lot of people I talk to say Wyvern Lord is the S tier flying. I disagree with this strongly. I believe Falcon Knight should be the S tier flying. Look at the stat growth here. It gets less strength growth, but if you look, it gets a higher speed growth, basically double that of Wyvern Lord. Again, that attributes to your avoidance rates, so that's pretty important. And then look over here, you get resistance. Remember, resistance is going to be more valuable than defense, especially when you're dealing with something that already has high speed. It can avoid most of your physical attacks anyways. So resistance is going to be more important, I think, because of the fact that you know, you're already able to just avoid that kind of stuff with the melee. But magic is the one scary thing. Magic will always do more damage than physical, so if you can't avoid magic, then at very least you can resist it. For that reason, I think Falcon Knight is going to be your S tier flying. Then you have to talk about Pegasus Knight to go with that. Look at this. Pegasus Knight is intermediate. This is one of your earliest on flying units. In addition to that, if you take a character that trained as Pegasus Knight and then went into Falcon Knight, it will retain the triangle combat art. Again, this is something that I've discussed with Twitch streamers and have kind of seen in game. But basically, triangle combat art says it guarantees a critical strike. Notice the wording, guarantees critical strike. As far as I can tell, and as far as other people can tell, that means this does not miss. Think about that for a minute. If you were to use your Frozen Lance ability on something and then critical that, oh my goodness, you're talking about OP damage. Assuming that that particular enemy does not have magic resistance. Like, mind blown right there. That's a crazy thing to combine it with. So yeah, Falcon Knight, I think, is your S tier. Now, for non-mobile units, let's look at that stuff. I think that out of your non-mobility units, as I mentioned earlier, Bishop is one of them. Some of your others will be Swordmaster, Assassin, Sniper, and where's the other one? Warmaster, I guess I can kind of see it as being strong, but not as much as the other ones. So, yeah, let's go ahead and just look at all those. Now, Swordmaster gets Sword Crit plus 10. So it's one of the very few classes that gets a bonus to critical. But more importantly is the stat growth. Look at this right here. It's HP, Strength, Speed, Charisma. You're going to be very reliant on speed with this kind of stat growth to get you out of messes. It's not like Falcon Knight where it has like a backup plan because of the fact that it doesn't grow resistance. But it does have 20 speed, which is pretty insane. It has strength to go with it, so that's also insane. when you combine that all with the critical rates, it gets pretty nutty. Now, even though Assassin doesn't get the bonus with criticals, it does get Sword Fair just like Swordmaster. But yeah, it doesn't get any strength bonuses, but it does get Dex and Speed, which are, again, pretty valuable. This means the Assassin is going to be able to land criticals as well as avoid most attacks. So for that reason, I'm kind of thinking the strength growth is probably not that important, but we'll see. Now, Sniper is a discussion itself. I think this actually should be higher up in tier than the other lists put it at. If you'll notice right here, it has a HP, Strength, Dex, and Luck and Charisma growth. If you look at Bow Knight, which is what everybody uses when it comes to bows, look at this. It only grows HP and Charisma. Sniper grows Dexterity and Strength, which means you're going to be able to hit something for very, very high amounts of damage. For that reason, I think Sniper is your better bow class. As I pointed out with the longbow earlier, it's a range bonus. Sniper gets +1 range bonus already, so that means they can take a longbow up to 4 range, which is already pretty extreme range. You should not need to be able to hit something any further than that. Another thing too to keep in mind is that if you master Sniper, it gets the Hunter's Volley Combat Art, which is 2 consecutive hits. So it makes up for that lack of speed growth. Whereas Bow Knight really can't do that. Yeah, so there's that. The only reason I'm willing to consider Warmaster is just because of the fact that it's one of the other few classes with critical rating, but also in the fact of its stat growth. It doesn't get Dexterity, but it does get a speed growth, along with the high HP and strength. If you combine this with the already high damage base of axes, well, now you have something that hits like a truck. You just have to pray it hits. That's the problem. So for that reason, I'm not really keen on Warmaster, because you're very reliant on a 10 speed growth to actually hit something. It's not like Assassin with 20 dex, 20 speed, or Swordmaster with basically double the speed. Remember, you need speed to overmatch in the mechanics. If something has more speed than you, then they're going to be able to attack you more than you can attack them. So that's kind of why I'm saying about all that about this and Hunter's Combat Art. But yeah, so to summarize, I consider Swordmaster, Assassin, Paladin, Sniper, Bishop, Falcon Knight, and Holy Knight to be the classes to consider. So my list is going to be a lot different than the other lists, but you can see that I have a good reason for disagreeing with the list based on numbers alone, and also just based on what the class does. So, yeah, there's that. Let's go ahead and finish this recording by discussing the characters. There's a reason that I need to list a bunch of different things. It's because each character has a different growth rate when it comes to these skills, right? So you'll notice, like, for example, with, let's just pull out, let's just do Marianne. So you'll notice Marianne gets a good rating on Riding and Faith, Lance's specialty of hers. So already she has the basis for becoming a Falcon Knight because of the fact that Falcon Knight requires sword, lance, and flying. So it's true that she doesn't get sword as a good thing for her, but she does get sword and flying, which does kind of make up for that. Or I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. Sword and lance, I'm sorry, yeah. flying isn't in here, but yeah, so you can see that Marianne's kind of set up for that. But yeah, so you can once you figure out the classes that you need to look at the individual characters. Now you can recruit characters from other houses, and there are guides on how to do that. But yeah, you have to kind of consider this part with the class and all that other stuff. So yeah, keep that in mind. I'll link this for you as well. But yeah, the reason that you want to keep this in mind is because the faster this character can get to the rating needed to not only graduate to the class but reach the abilities mentioned here, the better that you will be in a fight. It's part of a discussion called min-maxing, and that's something somebody else is going to have to do, because I'm not that great at that particular kind of stuff. I'm great at discussing theories and why I disagree with something, but when it comes to min-maxing, I'm not very good at math stuff. So, the point is that you kind of have to look for that stuff. I think out of the characters you could use for Falcon Knight, you're probably going to be looking at Petra and Ingrid. I think Marianne and Annette are going to be like bottom of the barrel type of thing. It just depends on how many flying units you want and what you're trying to do and all that. So, yeah, keep that in mind. But yeah, for now, that's kind of what I think in a nutshell. I'm interested to hear or read what you have to say in regards to this entire discussion, though. So please post in the comments so I can see what you say and respond accordingly. Thanks for listening.